Hi, welcome back to Miss Bradshaw's class, day 5 already, and we are getting into real Unit 1 content today. With this lesson is called Taxes and Conflict. It's basically causes of the American Revolution. French and Indian War is where our curriculum officially starts for this class. So everything so far has been like some background knowledge and some useful skills that you'll be learning throughout this course. This is where your first test's material is going to begin officially. So for your warm-up, we're going to take a little look at Patrick Henry's Give Me Liberty or Give Me Death speech. I'm going to save this analysis for our in-person class, but you see here some of the debates that we are going to explore, how we get to this point throughout this lesson. So it's a little preview for us, and I can't play this for copyright, so we'll save that for class. So today, once we've analyzed that speech, we're going to go into these slides and notes on taxes and conflict, and your exit ticket is going to be about the loyalist versus the patriot perspective. The question to have in mind today is, how did increasing economic and political British influence lead to a revolution? Last time we were talking about how these colonies and these settlements are growing and conflict that this could lead to. And in your exit ticket, you contributed to some posters around the room, if you were with me in person, about different types of conflict that these settlements might face. So we're going to take a little closer look at one of the types of conflict, which is European countries versus other European countries. So you'll see on this map, we have this red coded area, which are British claims, and then the blue area are French claims. And these red and blue stripes are the disputed areas. And that's going to be the main focus of a conflict here. So they want this disputed area. Both of these countries want access to this area in order to access the resources. And they are trying to kind of battle for this power over the most power over this new world. So the countries aren't so keen to work together because of cultural differences. And there's also going to be conflict in this trying to obtain the disputed area between the European settlers and the Native American people, because the Native American people have already faced a lot of broken treaties in the short time that the settlers have been in the quote new world. So at this point, the Native American people are probably going to be more hesitant to agree to more treaties or promises or allyships because they've already been facing this idea of, okay, once more people come over, that means the Native American people have to push further and further and further west. So the disputed area here is the Ohio River Valley. The French are trading with Native American people here, and they're also starting to build forts. This makes the British colonists wary of what's going on here because they thought that they had claim over the Ohio River Valley as well. But now that the French presence there has escalated from just trading with people who live there into building forts here, the British are beginning to feel threatened. So George Washington, you'll come to know him a lot in the next few lessons, carries a letter to the French troops that are living in that area and asks them to leave, claiming that the British have control over that area, but the French troops refuse. So this brings the British colonists to the question, should we fight to keep the Ohio River Valley, or should we just drop it and let the French live there, have control over that? And they ultimately decide that they're going to fight for the Ohio River Valley. And each side, the French and the British, begin to try to recruit Native American people to help them. The British attempt to convince the Iroquois people to help, but the Iroquois ultimately decide to side with the French because they had a good trading relationship with the French. They thought the French would win. The French were more present in the area in their minds. And the Native American people were starting to not like the way that British people were treating them, as there were more and more broken promises and treaties. So it's going to be a big advantage on the French side that the Iroquois people are willing to help them put in this fight because they have vast knowledge of the land. They have a large enough population to contribute to the fighting force of this war. Now, the colonists' plan comes from this Albany plan. This is created by Benjamin Franklin, and he has this idea that each of the 13 colonies that are developing should send delegates to a council, and that council would make decisions about the war on behalf of all of the colonies. The purpose of this plan was to unite the colonies, to have some kind of figurehead of an early central government that could make decisions on what should happen in this war on behalf of the colonists through their representatives. But the colonies were really hesitant to give up their local governments in favor of a more central government. They're really enjoying this local government feel during this time. They are embracing salutary neglect. So there's not very much influence from Britain at this time in the colonies, and creating a larger central government could feel too big and far away, kind of like Britain does to that. The British also did not really want the colonies to create this central government figurehead, even if it was just to make decisions about this war, because it would be a sign of independence and make them able to make future decisions. So perhaps you've seen this political cartoon before. A few days ago, we talked about how to analyze political cartoons with this acronym SPAM. And again, this stands for symbols, people, action, and message. So let's take a look at this cartoon. It says join or die. And then this is a broken up snake. It has each of the parts labeled with different letters. So for example, these could symbolize different colonies, such as South Carolina, North Carolina, Virginia, Massachusetts, Pennsylvania, New Jersey, New York. People, there aren't really people in this cartoon, but this people could also be figures. So I'd say the colonies are kind of people. So what does this snake symbolize? So if this snake is all together, perhaps it could symbolize like a ready to go army, a put together force that's ready to attack the French as a threatening creature. Remember that action is not what is happening in the cartoon, but what the author of the cartoon wants you, the viewer of the cartoon, to do. So clearly, based on this caption, always important to look at the captions of the cartoons. He wants you to join or die. So join what? Join the Albany plan. Join in this idea of creating a central government in order to make decisions about this French and Indian War. Therefore, what is the message? The message is that we are going to lose this war. We are going to die unless we are a united force. Look, we're all cut into little tiny pieces. This is not a living snake when it's all in little tiny pieces. The snake is going to die. We're all part of the same snake. We can be a force as one and make joint decisions that will help us. So we'll have a bit of discussion about that. So once the colonists decide to officially join this war, George Washington launches an attack from Fort Necessity, and the French quickly surrender that fort and defeat the British. Neither the French nor the British actually declare war for 2 years. Okay, I think that I lost connection for just a second. I'm just going to start at the top of this slide and hope everything went well here. Great. So to jump back in, we were talking about some of the early battles of the French and Indian War. So one of these first battles is when George Washington launches an attack from Fort Necessity. The French quickly surrounded that fort and defeated the British. This is an example of one battle, but neither the French nor the British actually declare war for 2 years. They rely on Native American people mostly to do the fighting rather than recruiting and retaining their own military. War is declared in 1756, And this is when it turns into a global struggle. Britain and Prussia are fighting French and their allies in Europe, and Britain also fights France in the Caribbean, India, and North America. Another name for the French and Indian War is the 7 Years' War, so you might hear it referred to as that as well. So the first years of war are not looking too well for the British. The Native American people are often raiding British settlements, killing settlers, burning farms and crops, and trying to drive people back towards the eastern coast rather than continuing to spread west and take over more Native American land. So one of the turning points for the British is when William Pitt takes over, and he commands from London. He's able to capture some forts and rename them after himself. And eventually, the city of Pittsburgh is named for William Pitt, and that is in the state of Pennsylvania. So that's the area we're talking about here. After William Pitt takes over, there are so many British victories, and the British are able to capture Quebec and Montreal, and that ultimately signals the end of the war. So, due to this end of the war, the British gain Canada and all of the land east of the Mississippi River. So, all of this red area is now belonging to Britain. Spain helped the French, and they also gave up Florida to Britain. So that's also included in this east of the Mississippi River. Now the continent is divided between Britain and Spain rather than Britain, France, and Spain. The colonists are really happy. The French and the Spanish are pushed further away, but Native American people are unsure what happens to them now. They were hoping, those that sided with the British were hoping that this helping the British to win this war would guarantee them some rights to their own land. But this new promise of the British owning land to the Mississippi River makes them doubt whether this guarantee is true because of those previous broken treaties. There were also those who had sided with the French, and the French had promised them access to land if the French were to win, and now the French have lost. So those tribes, such as the Iroquois who had sided with the French, are also wondering what their fate will entail. So due to this unsettlement from the Native American people, this fear of what will happen next, we see some pushback against the British settlements as those settlements continue to move to the west. Chief Pontiac is one of those that initiates attacks against British settlements in Pontiac's rebellion. So in order to prevent conflicts with Native American people, King George III decides that he is going to put a limit on how far British settlers can move to the west. Even though the British have just won land all the way up through the Mississippi River, King George III draws a line at the Appalachian Mountains and asks that the colonists do not move further west than those mountains, because he does not want to fund more wars, more conflicts with the Native American people. So this halts expansion, even though some colonists had already bought land to the west of this. And this satisfies Pontiac's rebellion for now, but the colonists are not satisfied with these new laws, so they probably will not last long. One of the main results of the French and Indian War, besides the new access to land, is a whole lot of debt acquired. Britain views that they fought in this war to help the colonists, and therefore the British government feels that the colonists should be the ones to pay for the debt of the war. The colonists are not too happy about this, so the British are going to send in some soldiers to the colonies to help them try to create some order and require that these colonists contribute to the debt through some new taxes. So before we go to that, let's do a quick little multiple choice practice. If you're in class, I'll send you this practice on your Chromebook to try out. It says, during the colonial period, which proposal suggested the creation of an intercolonial assembly to address defense and Native American relations? and was famously illustrated with the join or die political cartoon. So this is something that we just talked about. So go ahead and pause, think about it to yourself. You should have the Albany Plan. So now that we're to this place where the Kingdom of Great Britain is trying to raise money to pay off the debt of the French and Indian War, they're going to levy some new taxes. And these are some examples of those new taxes. We've got the Sugar Act, tax on molasses, wine, and silk. The Quartering Act requires colonists to feed and shelter British troops that are placed there to enforce these taxes. The Stamp Act requires colonists to pay a tax for paper items, and the Townshend Acts taxes tea, glass, paint, and lead, and the proceeds from this tax largely pay the salaries of royal officials in the colonies. We've also got the Declaratory Act of 1767. This allows the British to make any act they feel they need, and the colonists must follow it. The Stamp Act is ultimately repealed. We'll talk about that in a moment here. So this act is created in kind of response to the repeal of the Stamp Act, trying to show that Great Britain still, despite that repeal, has ultimate authority over the colonies. So colonists are really upset because Britain has been leaving them alone. They've been living under salutary neglect, and suddenly Britain is trying to get extremely involved with how the colonies are running. They're not too happy about that. So colonists make this main point that they did not vote for these members of parliament who are trying to tax them. So therefore, parliament has no right to tax them. They didn't vote these people into office. They're saying no taxation without representation. And the Sons of Liberty are one of the main groups that's going to lead protests and boycotts here. And this is something that leads to repealing the Stamp Act. So some areas that are part of the United States today still use this slogan, no taxation without representation. For example, Washington, D.C. does not have representation in Congress. So even see things like license plates of D.C. with this slogan on them to try to advocate for congressional representation for areas in the U.S. today, such as Washington, D.C. or territories like Puerto Rico. So some of the main members of the Sons of Liberty are Samuel Adams and John Hancock. The Sons of Liberty's leadership is very important because it helps to establish organized movements of protest. So organizing things like boycotts and spreading the word about them so that many people across the colonies can participate. One of the events that motivates a lot more of the colonists to be on board towards revolution is the Boston Massacre. This occurs in 1770 when a group of unarmed colonists began to insult a British soldier, and then more soldiers gathered and shots began to fire. 5 colonists died in this event. So here you'll see a source from the time that's trying to show the British are the ones being violent from this artist's point of view. All of the fires going from the British side and killing Americans or colonists over here while people run away injured while these stand strong. So this is trying to portray that the colonists were innocent victims in this situation. It will motivate more people to become involved. Another event that's going to motivate more people to become involved is the Boston Tea Party. So people are extremely upset about the Tea Act. They did not want this tax to begin. So some colonists in Boston dressed up as Native American people and raided some ships, throwing 300 chests of tea into Boston Harbor. So you'll see a pattern of a lot of this happening in Massachusetts. Again, Boston is in Massachusetts. So in response to the Boston Tea Party, Britain passes the Intolerable Acts, which are actually called the Coercive Acts. This is directly in response to that Tea Party with the provision that the colonists should repay the costs of the damaged tea that they did that night of the Boston Tea Party. It also placed the colony, particularly the colony of Massachusetts, under stricter military control. So you've seen a lot already about military control, the quartering acts, military control, again, here as part of the coercive acts. The colonists hate this so much, they put it into the third constitutional amendment when they eventually create their own government, that the US citizens would never be forced in times of peace to quarter, to feed, and house the US military. Here's another multiple choice practice. Again, pause, read, choose your own choice so that you get some practice here. Which series of measures enacted by the British Parliament in 1774 aimed at punishing the colony of Massachusetts for the Boston Tea Party and asserting British authority is commonly known as the Intolerable Acts? You should have the Coercive Acts. So that's the actual name for it. Intolerable Acts is just what the colonists called it because they thought it was intolerable. They did not like it. So now we're heading into war, and here you see a comparison of some of the advantages that England has versus the 13 colonies. So England has a much larger population. Manufacturing is flourishing. They have a lot more money. They have a much larger army. They have many dedicated leaders, but they're at an extremely long distance. They're going to struggle to get supplies. Based on this chart alone, England should be predicted to win. They have many more advantages than the colonies do. But let's see what actually happens. So the famous shot heard around the world is the Battle of Lexington and Concord. This is the shot that begins what becomes the Revolutionary War, although it was not officially that at the time of this battle. So the British were marching towards Concord. They wanted to confiscate weapons that the colonists had hid. And there's a lot going on here. Sam Adams and John Hancock are being arrested in Lexington. Paul Revere, William Dawes, and Samuel Prescott hear about this and go to warn all of the colonists that the British are coming. Even though Revere was caught and arrested, Dawes was able to get the message out. And the colonists who were willing to volunteer for this battle were ready for war by the time that the British arrived. So this leads to a second constitutional Congress, and there are many delegates elected to be a part of this Congress, including John and Samuel Adams, Patrick Henry, Richard Henry Lee, George Washington, Ben Franklin, and Thomas Jefferson. And this is an early example of them trying to govern the colonies as a whole, trying to be that central government figure, including printing money, establishing committees to communicate with Native American people, and even setting up a post office. But most importantly, they create the Continental Army to try to organize an effort against the British, and they put George Washington in command. At this point, a lot of people still do not want independence from Britain. They're just wanting to show that all of these acts they have been putting out are a problem and trying to fix it, trying to make some changes here, perhaps get some representation. So we have another major battle here, the Battle of Bunker Hill. Information is leaked that a British commander, Thomas Gage, was planning to launch an attack south of Boston. So over 1,000 Massachusetts and Connecticut soldiers and Minutemen, as well as enslaved and freed African American people, gathered to defend the city of Boston. 450 colonists were left dead. 1,054 British people were left dead, including 89 officers. This ended as a British win, but it showed that the colonists were able to put up a strong fight. After this battle, the colonists send out this olive branch petition. They're sending this document as a last attempt for peace with King George III. They're saying, hey, we're showing you what we're capable of. We don't want to become an independent country. We're just trying to fix these problems we have. So it's on you. This is an offer for peace. What do you want to do? Britain, King George. So this is everything that's leading up to this moment. We've got the end of the French and Indian War leads to extreme debt for Britain. So Britain enacts several new taxes, including the Sugar Act, the Stamp Act, the Townshend Acts. This accompanied with past grievances such as the Navigation Acts of the 1650s that contributed to mercantilism, which we discussed last time, lead to riots breaking out, such as the Boston Massacre, which increases public opinion in supporting for this rebellion against Britain. Eventually, the Boston Tea Party and other protests organized by the Sons of Liberty. And we just talked about the Olive Branch Petition. After a poor response to that, we're going to get the Declaration of Independence. With that, they are declaring independence. They want to become an independent country at that point, or at least everyone signing that document does. So here's kind of an overview of the main causes of the revolution. We've got religious intolerance, economic distress, social injustice, Enlightenment ideas, which we touched on one of the last slides from last time, unpopular method of rules, that's the no taxation without representation, and nationalism. People are beginning to feel a sense of pride in their colonies rather than in Britain. So let's take a moment to discuss some enduring issues that are existing in these colonies. So we, of course, have conflict. We've talked about a lot of conflicts already today. Conflict between different European countries, conflict between the colonies and their mother country, conflict between the colonies and the Native American people are some examples of conflict here. We also have desire for power. The colonists want power over what kind of taxes are being issued. They want power over regulating their own trade, for example. What else have we got? We've got impact of interconnectedness, perhaps. The colonies are becoming interconnected with one another as they develop similar goals. That's another way they become interconnected. So two big vocabulary words that lead to this revolution is the end of salutary neglect. Now, I use this word several times today. Salutary neglect was when originally the British were not paying much attention to the colonies. The colonies were originally governing themselves until everything changed after the French and Indian War, because at that point, Britain needed the colonists to pay more taxes in order to pay off the debt of the French and Indian War, and the colonists were not having it. We also have mercantilism. So this is something that had been going on for a long time. It's one of the reasons that Britain wanted to establish these colonies. Britain is trying to sell more goods than it buys. So this is that idea we discussed last time where the colonies basically ship out raw materials to Britain. Britain manufactures them and then sells them back to the colonies and to other places around the world. The colonies are not supposed to begin really manufacturing, and they're definitely, with the Navigation Acts, not allowed to trade with other countries, including other countries' colonies. So this is one of the economic struggles that the colonists want to do something differently with. They want to have autonomy over their own trade policies. So we've also discussed how to do IDs. Remember, this is the who or what, when, where, and historical significance, with this last one of historical significance being the most important. We went over 3 of the words today that are on your IDs. That's mercantilism, salutary neglect, and sons of liberty. So you should go back through your notes. You could try with your memory first. You can use the internet or buddies to assist you, but you should never have the same phrasing as someone else in the class. You should never copy directly from a slide. You should show me that you have read or listened to and interpreted what you have read or listened to into your own words so that I can see that you understand that definition and that significance. You can take some time to do that, and then when you are finished, spend the remaining time working on your women's history assignment. This is the last class time that you will have available to work on that, as the first presentations are going to be within next lesson. Our exit ticket for today is going to be to select the point of view of a loyalist or a patriot and write an argument from their point of view on whether or not the colonies should go to war. I want you to cite at least 2 pieces of evidence from today's lesson to support your claim. So I think I should write on here really that a loyalist, of course, is somebody who is supporting Great Britain. They're loyal to Great Britain. And a patriot is somebody who is going to be pushing and fighting for independence. So I'll add those details on this slide since the previous slides hadn't really discussed it yet. Thank you all so much for watching today. I hope that you enjoyed our first real lesson of content, and I will see you next time for the American Revolution lesson. Thanks. Bye.